The first time that Jesus spoke to his disciples about his passion and death that will lead to his resurrection, Peter stopped him and started to rebuke him. Jesus said to him, "Get behind me, Satan. Your thoughts are not those of God, but of men." The second time that Jesus spoke of his Paschal mystery, the disciples discussed among themselves to find out who among them was the greatest. Jesus told them, "The one who wants to be the greatest must be the last of all and servant of all." Today, we read about the third time that Jesus spoke to them of the cup he had to drink. And James and John ask him to grant them the first places in his kingdom. Of course, James and John understand more or less what Jesus tells them about his passion. But all that they finally keep in mind is the ultimate award that Jesus is going to receive, and not the passage through suffering and death. They know that there are going to be these difficult times, but they are sure that Jesus will eventually gain victory over his enemies and establish the kingship in Israel with power and might. What James and John ask for is only normal in any human relationship and also in politics. Who among us would not like to know for sure that he or she is important in the eyes of at least one person he or she is close to? A child who does not feel loved by its mother will remain a child without a sense of security. Any person will expect of his friend to treat him at least once in a while as a privileged person. And what else do James and John ask for, if not to have important jobs in the kingdom that Jesus is going to establish? But the other side of the coin is that by wishing to be important, we end up pushing others out of the way. We want to be well placed, and we do not leave any room for others to place themselves. We seek to be loved, and we hurt others who have the same need for love. We want to be recognized, and we end up considering others to be less worthy of attention than us. There is a son of Zebedee lying dormant in each one of us. We develop the tendency to install our private domains in our enterprises, our associations, our families, and in our communities and church groups. Sometimes it is jealousy that destabilizes us and lets fear creep into our hearts. And fear has only one means of reassuring itself, that of instilling still more fear into others. As Jesus said, their great men make them feel their authority. Note that Jesus does not become angry about the request of the two brothers. He does not tell them, "Bunch of egoists, in what respect would you be more worthy than my other disciples?" But he gently puts them a question in order to lead them further. You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup that I must drink, and be baptized with the baptism with which I must be baptized? In Jesus' time, The country is under Roman occupation. Among the Jews, people have different types of attitudes towards the colonizers. The Herodians take an active part in the government of the country and are of great help to the Romans to maintain the Pax Romana. The Sadducees are less pro-Roman than the Herodians, but they appreciate the law and order situation imposed by Rome and try to have a good working relationship with the rulers. As for the Pharisee movement, it is hostile to any contamination by foreign elements and strives to keep intact the Jewish religious fervour. The Pharisees look down upon the publicans, whose job is to collect taxes for Rome. The Essenes go still further than the Pharisees. They try to maintain the Jewish purity by completely isolating themselves from society, and some of them live alone in the desert. On the other end of the spectrum are the zealots, the zealous ones, who are regularly up in arms against the occupants. From time to time, messiahs spring up from among them and organize armed insurrections against the rulers. This is perhaps one of the reasons why Jesus did not want to be called a Messiah. Today, Jesus tells the sons of Zebedee that the path he has chosen is not a triumph over others, but rather the sacrificing of himself. But let us not look too harshly on James and John, for the other 10 too, on hearing this, become vexed, because they too would like to have the best places by the side of the Master. Jesus turns their thoughts away from the final glory to the path that will lead to that glory. He reminds them that the values of the kingdom are different from those of this world. It shall not be so among you, he tells them, for the Son of Man also came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus gives his life as a ransom for many. This formula, borrowed from the book of Isaiah, reflects the interpretation that the disciples gave to Jesus' death, but that Jesus himself had hinted at by implying that he was the suffering servant. The word many in this phrase is the translation of the Hebrew word rabim and of the Greek word poloi. This word points to an extremely important conception in the Bible, in the sense that the Bible uses it to denote the Gentile nations. Thus, Jesus announces that his redemptive sacrifice, of which that of the suffering servant was the figure, will bring salvation to the pagans. The new covenant is not offered exclusively to Israel, but rather to the whole world, invited to be partner to the covenant. Jesus will again pass on this fundamental message just before his death, that is, on Holy Thursday, after having done the duty of the servant by washing the feet of his disciples. You call me Master and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. We can guess with what patience and understanding Jesus had to educate and form his disciples till the very last moment. Only those who try to silence the spirit of domination in their hearts can join Christ in his mystery and reinforce the hope of humanity by showing that life puts on a meaning if lived with Christ in the Father's presence. He who conquers, says the Lord, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I myself conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne.